Welcome to the lesson. We're going to cover a number of functions, and by functions I mean, as you can see on the screen, examples such as if, VLOOKUP, index and match. What my intention is to go through what they are, explain when they can be helpful, substituting parts of the function, so there's different elements of them which you'll see, and then running through an example. And I won't necessarily go through them in that particular order, but I'll cover those aspects as I go. So to begin with, we're just going to look at if, and I'm going to show you on the screen. So the if function can be used to allow you to interrogate information in a cell or cells and then tell the program to return a response, which can be text, number, a cell reference, or another function or a calculation. Now it sounds a bit complicated, and this will become clear when we look at the example. So it's probably best to think of a particular example. So here I'm using a project, and I want to say, well, okay, if the cost of the project exceeds £3 million, then I would want to abandon it. Otherwise, I would go ahead. So how would I write that out? Now, as you can see from the first bullet there, this is the formula. So you start off with an equal sign, which you do with all functions, and then it starts if, then open bracket. And then in this case, I've used cell A1, so that would be wherever your total figure was. Now that could be a number of cells, so you could have A1, A2, A3, A4, B3, wherever those figures are to make up that total amount you want to aggregate. And then you have a symbol in there, which is greater than, and then you have 3 million written out as a text, so no pound sign, no commas, and things like that. So it's effectively your criteria. So when asking the question, you write that. And then, of course, you need an answer. Now, after the first comma, it's coming up with an answer if the amount in cell A1 exceeds. So if it's true, basically. So what do you want to do if it's correct or if it's true? In this case, I want to enter the text abandon in the cell. If it's not true, in other words, if it's less than 3 million, then I want you to enter the text proceed. So that's what that formula really does. Now, just to cover off on the bullets there, all functions have brackets. It must be enclosed. So all of those various variables, we call them, they have to be enclosed within brackets, otherwise it won't work. And as you get more complicated, as you add things together, sometimes you'll find there's an error, and more often than not, it could be a missing bracket. Now, it's also important that each of the elements are separated by a comma. I appreciate I'm speaking quite quickly here, but you can read this separately, and then you can stop and pause the video if you need to go back. When we do the example, I'll go through a little bit slower. So just reviewing what I've got there, we talked about A1 being the costs. We talked about the symbol. So here we've got the greater than symbol. It can be less than, so the other way around. It can be equal to, or it can be a combination of these, so equal to or less than. It all depends upon what you're trying to do and what you're trying to get an answer for. In this case, the 3 million is a limit, so you can adjust that as you see fit. And then the abandon and the proceed are just the answers, really. So if the project costs more than 3 million, what do you want to do? You want to abandon it. If it costs less than 3 million, we want to proceed. That's what we're really asking in this example. Okay, so all of the above elements of the function in the brackets can be replaced. So you can put references in. So here I've written down, and let me just highlight it so you can see it. If A1 is greater than H3, J7, K9. Now that makes very little sense on reading because you can't really grasp what it's referring to. So up here it's easier to see what you're referring to. So you're referring to a cell, okay. You're referring to a tangible total number. You're referring to tangible text. Now those elements could all be written in those cells. In other words, why would we do this? Well, we would want to perhaps adjust the content. So we might say, okay, instead of specifying a limit in the actual formula, we go to this cell H3 and we can adjust the limit in there. And then that will also reflect in the formula. Again, the cells could contain pre-written text. So they could already contain these words, or you could put figures in there, or you can change them. So it allows you a little bit more flexibility. Again, you'll see this when we do the example. So like I said, it's best done as a real example. So what I'm going to do now is just quickly switch to the spreadsheet. And just so you know here, what I have is a sample database. And this could be any database. I'm just using this as a basis for the examples. And what I want to do is I want to go into sheet 1. So here you can see there's a separate sheet. And that's just really where I'm going to do all of my work. So I'm going to go to cell A1, so up at the top corner here, and I'm just going to type in order value. This is just really setting it up for the formula. And then in the next cell here, B1, I'm going to type, in this case, I'm going to type 20,000. And then what I'm going to do now is go to cell A2, action, and type in action if value exceeded, and then action if within limits. So in the first case, I'm going to type in the word audit, and it'll become clear why I write this as we work through. And then in the next one, NFA, which in this case means no further action. So you'll see why I've done this as things progress and as we work through the rest of the example. So what I'm going to do now is switch back to the sample data, and then what you can see on the screen is a table, and it's not just a regular table where you type out headers across the top there, and then you sort of populate rows. This table has been inserted. So if you look at this section here, you can do insert. And then you can, if this wasn't already there, you could click on this icon here for a table, and then it applies a number of formatting and structure to what you've done. So for example, if you add a formula in, which we'll see later on, it will automatically copy the formula down to the rest of the rows. Now here we've got about 5,500, near enough 5,500 rows. And if you add a column, it will automatically format and add the column, and it's very useful because it will adjust the range of the table to account for your additional rows or your additional columns. I'll highlight these as we go through. So what I want to do here though is I want to go into cell L1, so right at the top there, and I just want to put a header called audit required. Now what I'm doing is I'm putting this in. I'm just going to expand the column there so you can see it. I want to be able to indicate based on the order value, so based on column J, when I need to conduct a check. So what I want to do is I want to set a limit, which was 20,000. I want to question what's in there. If the figure is more than 20,000, I want it to indicate to audit. If it's less, I want it to say no further action. So what I'm going to do now is start to type out the formula. So when typing out the formula, as I said, you start out with an equal sign. Oops, not that sign, an equal sign. And then the function, sorry, is if. I keep saying formula, but actually it's a function. And then you start with an open bracket. Now what you can see on the screen, sometimes it doesn't show in the video, but if it shows on your screen, that's fine. But you have the component parts. So you have here something called a logical test, which is effectively the question, and then you have a value of false. So what if it's sorry, a true, which means it'll return that value if it's actually true, and then a value of false. And you'll see how this works as we go through it. So we know we're going to refer to cell J2. So just type in J2. So that's the start of the logical test, and you can see when I do that, it starts to highlight the box. So you can see what it's referring to. And then I want to say, okay, it's if it's greater than, so I use that little symbol, and you find that at the bottom of the keyboard on the right hand side, and you have to press the shift button to get that as well. And then you can just enter the figures, so 20,000. And that's the test. So I'm asking that question. The next thing now is, and what do you want me to do? So if it's true, if it is bigger than 20,000, I want to put in the word audit when I spell it properly. Now, looking at this particular part of the function, this element, when you enter text, you must have speech marks on either side of it. Otherwise, it'll generate an error and won't recognize it. When it comes to figures or numbers, you can just put the number in. So if it was 0 or 1 or whatever number you want, you can just put the number in. If it's a cell reference, you can just put the cell reference in and it will recognize that. So for the time being, I just want to do it this way and want to give this result. So that's if it's true. If it's bigger than 20,000, this is what I want you to do. And then there's an alternative. So if it's not bigger than 20,000, then as I said before, I want no further action. And again, I'm enclosing that. So just to recap, we've got called the logical test here. So is it greater than 20,000? And then we've got, if it is, what do you want to do? If it isn't, second one, what do you want to do? These are separated by commas. And then you just close the bracket there. That is the formula ready to go. When I press return on the keypad, it will automatically fill down in the rest of the table. And as you can see there, it has used the criteria I've set, and it said okay. And if we just check on one of these, 10,890, obviously that's below 20,000, therefore it says no further action. So you can see that you can apply a criteria to highlight when, for example, in this case, we need to audit. So as a bonus, what I'm going to do is to make it a bit quicker and easier on the eye, I'm just going to highlight. So I'm just going to select the first cell here. I'm going to just drag this sidebar all the way down to the 5,194 row. Just going to highlight the whole lot. What I want to do is I want to have a color to make it easier for me to see this. So if I go into the Home tab up here and then go to Conditional Formatting, which is in the middle of the screen, and I want to create a new rule. And what I do is there's a number of options you can choose from here, but in this case I'd like to go for format cells excuse me, that contain, and I want it to be equal to, and then if you just type in audit, and then if you go to format, you can then choose what you want the computer to do. So in this case I wanted to fill the cell with a red color. Now here you can do you can change the style, you can decide to change the text if you want to, you can put the borders around it, you can change the colors. All of that will show in this little sample box, so whatever you change will indicate. So you might, for example, want to change the text red as well, and that way you won't see any text, you'll just see a red box. But in this case what I want to do is I just want the cell here to fill in if it says audit. So if I click OK now and then click OK again, and then if I scroll all the way back to the top, there you see it's much easier, much quicker to spot that you've got audit here or NFA. So you can see immediately which ones you'd want to check. So to have a think about that now, what we can also do, again just a quick demonstration, if you do the drop down arrow, you can filter anyway on these criteria, so you can deselect NFA, but you can also filter now by color. Just something useful to know, particularly if you've got complex spreadsheets. So that was the first part. I'm just going to review my notes. So now what I want to do is I want to do this a slightly different way. So I'm going to go into cell M1 and I'm just going to type audit 2, and again it'll create another column. I'm just going to expand it slightly. And what I want to do now is I'm going to use that information I put in earlier. So I'm going to go and just for ease, because it's quicker and it'll be useful to show you. So what I've got is I've just highlighted L2. I'm now going to right click on this selected text here, and I'm just going to copy it. I'm going to press escape now and then go into this box here, and then I'm just going to go back into the dialog box at the top and then just paste. All I've done there is copy the formula, and then again it's just copied the whole thing down. Now I could write it out, but I'm going to demonstrate something else. What all it's done now is just copied out simply the same formula, and it's copied all the way down. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to this bar here, And when I click on it, if I click on a section, so you've got the formula in the bar at the top, and then at each point that is separated by a comma, you have, for example, here logical test. If I click on logical test, it highlights all of it. And then what you can do is you can then change things. Now, I only actually want to change this particular part. So if I just highlight that bit and then navigate to sheet 1 and then select B1, then that's now selected that. Now, what I also want to do while we're here is I want to click on the value if true. And here you can see the action if value exceeded. So I just want to click on that. And then value if false, I want to click on that one there. Now, the next thing to do, and this is very important, so you notice that it's got here J2. This is it shows what's called a relative reference, and B1 here, B2, B3. These are all relative. So if I copy this formula down, it will copy either down or across, and it will change the row or it will change the column. So what I want to do is I want it always to refer to these three cells, these B1, B2 and B3. And I always wanted to change from J2 to J3 to J4. So I don't want to adjust the J2, but I do want to adjust the others. Now, if you click on the formula here and you click on the section, so it highlights the same section, and you press F4 on your keypad, it will change the whole, it's actually changed the whole thing, and I don't want to do that. So let me just take out the dollar signs here, and then if I click on value if true and do F4, and value if false, do F4. Now obviously you can just click on the formula and type it, or you can just type it directly out, but what I've done there is J2 is what we call a relative reference. In other words, it will move around if you copy the formula in a different direction, and then the rest of them are absolute. In other words, they will not change. So if you, just to demonstrate that, if I go back to cell M2, you can see there's the formula, and you'll notice the only thing that will change will be J2 to J3 when I click one further down. The rest of them are the same. So why have I done this? Well, I've done it because I'm going to now go into this section here, sheet 1, and I want to change this limit now from 20 to let's say 40,000. If I click enter, so obviously you can't see anything there, what you can see is there'll be differences here. So you'll see here it had audit before, now it's got NFA. So rather than go in and adjust it, then I've gone and used a cell reference instead. Now what I'm going to do, just for the sake of continuity, is copy the format. Now if you click copy here, stick the cursor on the first one, scroll all the way down and highlight it down to the bottom of the page, and if I right click now, there is this option here which is paste formatting. If you click paste, it will paste the formula, it'll paste everything. That will paste the content, which is not what you want. This will paste the formula, which again is not what you want. Here it just pastes the formatting. So if I do that, you can see immediately the differences between the two criteria. So really the reason for showing this is to say, okay, you can refer to a cell basically instead of actually put the criteria in. So the next stage now, I want you to go back to sheet 1, and what I'm going to do now is if I go into B1 here, I'm going to name this cell. So if I click on here, I'm going to call this limit. Now just so you know, up here is basically effectively an address bar where you can enter a name basically. So now, for example, if ever I write something, and you'll see it in a second, if I use the name limit, it will refer to this particular cell. It doesn't matter which sheet you're in, it will refer to this cell. Obviously you can't have two names the same, but that's not going to happen. So here I want to call this one action, action underscore if action if in fact I've just used action if, sorry. Now it's important to use an underscore because you can't have spaces in here, so I'm just going to press return, and then here I want to call this one action underscore if underscore not. You can call it a name that is more convenient to use, so you could give it a nice short, quick, easy to remember name, and the reason why will become apparent now. So if I go back to the sample data and I just look at this formula here, then I'm going to adjust what's in here by clicking on these elements, and if I just highlight here up to the sheet. So if you remember, this is one part of the logical test. So here I want to write limit. When you start to write it out, you'll see that it will begin to give you options. So here it said there's a reference, a named reference called limit, and you can just click on this now. So if I click on that, it then inserts it, and what it's doing now is it's saying, okay, I'm going to look at that cell with whatever's in there. So if J2 is bigger than whatever's in that cell, then that's fine. And at the same point here, I'm going to type in action. So action if was the one where if it's true, if it's happening. So again, if you double click on that, and then if false, and then I'm going to do again action and action if not. And then if I press return now, again it will copy down in here. As you see, it doesn't change. So now if you see the difference, you've got words. Now these obviously could mean something to you, so it makes much more sense if you say, okay, you could put their audit limit, for example. But it's something that makes it easier and quicker for you to write. You don't have to worry about dollar signs when you want to refer to specific cells. Now you can go back here and you can start to play with this. So just for demonstration, I'm going to change audit to duck. No particular reason, just fancied using that reference, and there you can see it changes what's in there. So you can see it's much quicker to adjust whatever's in there. So I'm just going to change that back to audit. Now after that, what have I actually done now? I've created a column which indicates to me when orders have exceeded a value, and the reason is because I want to check them. So it's indicating to me that I should audit anything with the word audit in it, and highlighted in red in this case. Now I can also generate pivot tables with this information, and that can drive management actions. So I've touched upon absolute references, so cells marked with dollar signs either before the column A in this case or before the row number 1, so maybe $A, $1, as opposed to relative, which would be simply A1. That's useful if you want to fix where the formula is going to look, and it won't change when copied. If I just demonstrate this quickly now, if I now scroll to the right, it should, yeah, so it's actually used K2, so it's now referring to the amount including VAT. So it's incorrect in this case. Now what we could have done, we could have said, okay, stick a dollar sign in front of J, and then it would fix the column. So if I just do that now, in this particular formula, again it will automatically copy down. And if I now copy this to the right, it should be the same. You can see it is the same. So it's something to be aware of when you're copying formulas, that if you do use absolute or reference or relative references, there may be errors because it might not do what you want it to do, and you just need to reflect on that. We've named cells, so that's quite handy, because then you can quickly write out things. You can write something that's intuitive, it's shorter and neater to look at and quicker to use. You will have to be mindful of making sure those ranges are updated. So it's okay for a single cell, but if you have a number of cells, you'll see that later on, then you just need to make sure that the range is kept up to date when you do that. So if I just show you briefly here, up in formulas at the top, you have something called name manager, which is in the middle, and then here you've got all of the named ranges. So here, in fact, we have SD, which is the table, and if I click edit, it will show me what the range is. Now in this case, because it's a proper table, a set table by with the program using it, I suppose, I don't know how best to describe that, it will sort that problem out. It will always increase the range whenever necessary. So anything that refers to this is fine. If I just cancel, let's say if I go to column here and do edit. Now in this case it's not a good example, it's referring to the headers here. Let me try another one. Row, that's also referring to a column. If I look at edit, so this is referring to a cell. If this was multiple cells, you would have to adjust this, which you can do. You just do the drop down arrow and you could increase the range like that, and you can see here it changes. So just something to be aware of if you're playing with named ranges. It's a bit extra really on the lesson. What else is I going to cover? The conditional formatting, of course, is just used to draw your eye to the information, and there's a separate session on conditional formatting if you need to do that. So that's all there is for the if formula. So I'll just close off for that one.